Hi, Peter again from the Romford Horror Film Festival. I'm here with James Peaty, who is the writer, director and one of the producers.
Yeah, that's right.
For the short film Testimony.
That's correct.
Thanks for joining us, James.
Pleasure.
Would you like to tell us what Testimony is about?
Testimony is a short film about an unreliable narrator talking into a camera, very similar to this situation actually, describing a very subjective version of events surrounding him and I think his friend, and the kind of pursuit of a young lady that maybe doesn't end in, the most romantic of conclusions.
What was your inspiration to write this film?
Inspiration was to make a film. It was to make a film that was doable within a few days. That was cheap. That's one explanation. The kind of creative thing was I was always quite interested in. I like unreliable narrators, and I specifically wrote it for the actor who plays the part. Okay. So I kind of did it for him and another for the lead girl Heather. So David, who plays the lead part, was very much written for him, and wanted to sort of do something that played with perspective, time, all those kinds of things. Yep. And we were talking about what we'd kind of boil it down to. My little kind of boilerplate pitch was it was Alan Bennett's Psycho. So it's kind of, I wanted to do something that was a bit like that as well, that had a little bit of that Talking Heads kind of thing, but sort of fused with sort of like a bit of Norman Bates as well. Yeah. Alan Bennett's Norman Bates, there you go.
Wow, okay. So you'd worked with the actor before?
Yes, I had. I'd known David for quite a while. We made a short film kind of as a little test before that, and then subsequently we made another one as well a few years ago. Okay. Which is, I did even more terrible things to him in that one. So, and he was always game for it, so I can't complain.
Yeah,
so.
Fine. So how long did it take you to write the concept? Was it something that came quickly to you, or did you sort of write it over a period of time?
The film came together script-wise. I wrote it pretty quickly. I think I'm trying to think back, we made it in 2013, so I wrote it over Christmas of sort of 2012. I think it took me about, I think it was a month. It's like anything, the initial idea was there, the kind of main sort of part of the film was there, the kind of monologue stuff from the end, but I ended up writing a lot more stuff as I went along. So we sort of planned it from about January through to when we shot it in May. So I kind of tinkered with it all the way through, and we found the location. I kind of changed it a bit to kind of make the location fit with the what we had, and that was much better. So the script was kind of always the initial kind of draft of it. The first draft of it was written probably within about a week, and was pretty fixed from within. But you tinker with it all the way through. So, but we spent a long time preparing it because we didn't have very much money. So we had. We did a lot of prep, probably about 3 months. Right. Not every day, but we were doing it pretty much sort of then. And then we had a 3-day shoot. So it was,
how did you raise the money for the film?
From scrimping and saving.
Yeah, classic indie filmmaking.
Oh, we totally self-financed. It was made for very little. It was made for probably about 400 quid. Right. All in. Yep. So yeah, it was. And it was good because I ended up making 3 or 4. Was it 3 or 4 films? Well, some of the people, pretty much everybody who's worked on that film, I made a film last year, and before the lockdown, so I haven't made anything since then. But we pretty much most of the people who were involved, were still involved. I worked with like sound man on that. I've worked with for the first time. Some of the cast, crew. Yeah, so it was a good experience, and that kind of bled over into another 3 shorts really. Okay. It was another time.
So you mentioned the location. Whereabouts did you shoot the film?
We shot it in Hackney Wick, which was Fish Island, I think it was called. Okay. I'm not sure how I haven't actually been back to where we shot it for quite some time, so I don't know what's still there. But we shot it in a warehouse, which is where the DOP was living. Oh, right. And it was meant to be, I'll out them now, because I'm sure he's not living there now. No, he's not. It was a place where they were illegally renting it to tenants.
Right.
It was like on a business rates thing, and they were kind of living in this place. So it was like there were these little rooms made around in this warehouse where they were all kind of living on top of each other. So it was quite mad. But the warehouse was great because we had the kitchen in there that we used. There was a yard we could use, so we pretty much used it as a studio. So it was really good.
Worked out well. Yeah.
It did work out well. Sound was a bit of an issue because it was people living there. But it was fine apart from that. Yeah.
So you mentioned the sound. What kind of challenges did you face in terms of location? Was there any difficulties while you were shooting the film?
When we were shooting the film, not really. I think with the shoot was relatively. It was a lot of people. We had a day on the first day we shot. I think from like 8 in the morning or 9 in the morning. We got there at about 8 o'clock, and then we shot from 9 till 9, and we covered. We did about 5 or 6. We had a scene afternoon with extras and like everything else, and that was outside. That was a bit of a nightmare, just in terms of time and logistics. But the biggest problem we had was actually the cast situation, because 2 of them were cast. We got another actor who was going to play the part, and about 2 weeks before we shot, maybe even less than that, maybe about a week, the guy who was playing the part, who was going to play the other part, was clearly mad, and. I'm not going to go into some of the details, but basically it came to the point that he said he wanted to sleep in the set.
Right. As a method thing.
Well, one would assume so.
Right.
And we said he's bananas, so we had to get rid of him. And at the last minute, my friend Chris, who's quite a successful actor now, Chris. I said, well, who can we get? And he said, this guy is really good. And Alex, who's in the film, ended up playing the part, did a really great job. But the real stories would be with the other actor.
Daniel Day-Lewis, if he said, I want to sleep on the set, people would probably call him a genius.
Well, we paid him a lot of money to do it as well, so he was, this guy was not a genius.
No.
And also so the other thing that came out of the kind of rehearsals, so we're a long way from it now, so we can talk about it, the rehearsals were hideous.
Right.
Like, it was just hideous. I mean, the performances were kind of, I'm thinking this is, if he'd been like difficult and brilliant, then you'd kind of like say, maybe.
Yeah.
You know.
Okay.
But he wasn't. So it was much easier. And Alex, who came in, was very easy to work with, very natural, great on camera. Didn't matter. I've had like last minute recasting and things a few times now. So that's scary. I made a film a few years ago where we got called 2 days before we were shooting. The actress said she's got an audition, and she couldn't do the film.
Right.
And we booked everything; it was all out. And it's basically one character in the film, which was. Okay. So what we did with that, which was quite, it's the same actor who's in Testimony. David did it. He was going to play a very small part. There was a small other part in the film with no dialogue. And we kind of flipped it, so we turned the female character into a male character, and it worked very well. So we got a male character who then became a kind of prostrating, strange character. And the film was much better for it.
Right.
But that's the whole thing. You just have to kind of roll with the changes, and it was much better. But it's like what it teaches you, you're not in control of it. You don't know. You've got to kind of respond to the kind of chaos, the curveballs that get thrown your way.
Yeah. Whether
it's people wanting to sleep in the set or people who get after jobs and don't show up. So it's, and actually, I don't know what else. Maybe it's me. I don't know. I might be the reason they kind of bail at the last minute. But yeah, that was the most difficult part of Testimony. Everything else was pretty good. And the crew were great, and the film turned out well, I think, I hope. It's interesting watching it after so long. I hadn't seen it for ages.
So you mentioned unreliable narrators. Is there any films that you like that contain unreliable narrators that maybe you had in mind when you wrote Testimony?
I'm trying to think, actually. As I said, go back to the Alan Bennett Talking Heads things. There's an element of that in those monologues. Certainly, I think There's an element of that with Psycho. It's not quite like that, but
Yeah,
you can't. But Norman isn't quite what he seems.
Mm-hmm.
The obvious one is Memento.
Mm.
Then you've got things like, I guess, this stuff a bit like, bits like films like Jacob's Ladder
Mm-hmm.
would be one as well. So they're not technically that Angel Heart. They're kind of those sorts of ones.
Yep.
It's not so much. I think it's the unreliable narrator, and then the idea that you can kind of flip what the film is about.
Yeah.
I mean, this is more of a reliable narrator because you're doing it in 8 minutes. You've got to be quite compressed. Memento's great. I think following the first Christopher Nolan film is kind of quite similar in a way. I guess I think he plays with that quite a lot. Definitely. But I remember, definitely those early two were a big thing. Maybe David Cronenberg's films as well. He's one of my favourite filmmakers. I think, and David Lynch. I mean, I think you watch something like Lost Highway or Mulholland Drive to a lesser degree. All of those, Inland Empire, that whole kind of shift in perspective thing. Always really love that. But I do love, particularly with Cronenberg, things like I think Spider does that really well. There's a little bit of that in Naked Lunch. I guess there's a bit of that in sort of Videodrome. And definitely I think there's an element of that in the Existence as well. Yeah. So I'd say those, it's not one thing, but those are the kinds of things I like. So it kind of would always, you don't make films at that level either, but though that's what the thinking would have been. Mm-hmm. There is actually a Scanners reference. That's why he drills a hole in his head in the middle of it. Yeah. I think he wears the jacket we chose is very similar to Patrick McGowan's jacket that he wears as the Doctor in the Beard in Scanners. So there's no heads exploding, unfortunately.
No,
but that was in there because we like that. So. But I think Cronenberg, Lynch, Nolan, who I think are big influence on someone like Christopher Nolan anyway. So those all kind of coming together, I think, is really the genesis of what we were trying to do.
So you mentioned you haven't made much because obviously the pandemic recently. Have you got a future project you're working on?
Well, yeah. I mean, when I'm not making films, I can write comics. So I do RF 2000 AD and the magazine. The Judge Dredd magazine. So while I've not been doing comics, I've been making films. I've been doing that for the last year or so. So I've been spending a lot of time doing that. I have got I've got a film that I made literally just before the lockdown. Mm-hmm. We finished it in like late February. We then posted it during lockdown last year, which hasn't really been seen yet because I've not really put it out there. Okay. But that's ready to go. I wrote another short just before Christmas that I'd like to do at some point. But when we can, it's difficult without, if you're not dealing with big budgets or whatever else. I've got a couple of other scripts that are kind of like things that are sort of going on of feature scripts as well I've written, so we'll wait and see. But I'd like to make another short film. The short film I've written is the one I'd like to do. So.
Cool. Yeah. Final question, what's your favourite horror film?
Favourite horror film? Ooh, that's a tricky one. That's really tricky. My favourite horror film. Can you ever have a favourite horror film? I'm not sure. I really love the original Halloween. Yep. The John Carpenter's first one. As well. Yep. I think that's just a great film. It's a great low budget film. Yep. I love The Thing. Mm-hmm. If we're on a John Carpenter thing. I quite like Prince of Darkness as well. I think like that stuff. What's a horror film? I like Firewalk with Me. I think I like to think like that. Yeah. That is a horror film. Twin Peaks Firewalk with Me. Yep. Lots of probably the Cronenberg films. If I was going to go for sort of straight horror, I'd say the early ones. Maybe something like, I think The Fly is a great film. You can't really go wrong with that. I think that's kind of almost a perfect film. Yeah. I really love his version of The Dead Zone. I think probably those would be the favourites. I mean, I love The Shining. I love The Exorcist. I love Exorcist 3. I think Exorcist 3 is a great film as well. though it's those films. I mean, I think a lot of I think you could make a case for something like Mulholland Drive being a horror movie. You know, it's like there's an element of that.
Yeah, yeah.
Lost Highway as well. I mean, I think that Lost Highway is far scarier than a lot of horror films. So it will be stuff like that. I think. I mean, in terms of sort of older stuff, I loved all the Universal horror films and Hammer films as a kid. Watched them all the times. Yeah. We love Frankenstein Created Woman. That's always been a favourite of mine. The original, the Dracula, the 58 one, Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing one, I like a lot. And there's obviously Don't Look Now. I love Don't Look Now. I think that's a great film. So I've given you about 15.
Yeah, some great recommendations in there.
But yeah, they're pretty obvious ones. Are there any ones? I quite like some of the Dario Argento ones. I like sort of, was it Golden Crystal Plumage, Deep Red, stuff like that. That's all pretty good. I like Suspiria. I prefer the slasher ones actually than Suspiria, I think. Of the more recent films, I quite like. I thought Midsommar was pretty good.
Okay.
But those are the films I really like. I mean, I'm trying to think what other things you could throw in there. Robocop's not really a horror film, so but I love that. I was watching Total Recall again. That was on telly the other night. I was watching that. And I was thinking that was great. If you want gore, there's some great gore in that for a science fiction film. But yeah, those ones I'd say that. I mean, I think if you're going to boil it down to a kind of just a horror filmmaker, I would say David Cronenberg for me would be for me, he's made more great horror movies than probably anyone else. I mean, George Romero, there's some great horror movies in there. Argento's made some really good, but quality-wise, I think Cronenberg's films are really, really high. So, yeah, I'd say.
Some great recommendations there. Thank you, James.
That's all right. Pleasure.
Thank you for coming and joining us at Romford Horror.
It's been absolutely a pleasure.
Great stuff. Thank you.
Thank you.